You likely believe that you can identify when someone around you poses a danger. Perhaps you think you recognize toxic attitudes, manipulative behaviors, or negative energies as soon as they appear. In a world where we are taught to fear obvious danger, the verbal aggressor, the declared critic, the avowed enemy, we end up ignoring much more subtle and, paradoxically, much more devastating threats. But what if I told you that the greatest emotional risks you face in life rarely come from those who appear dangerous? What if the true poison isn't in aggressive words, but in laden silences? What if, instead of a declared enemy, what most destroys your energy is precisely that charismatic, sensitive person, or even someone from your own family? The truth is that our internal radar has been calibrated to detect obvious dangers, but frequently fails in the face of subtle ones. Like that friend who always makes you feel guilty when you're not available, or that family member who transforms each dinner into a tribunal where your dreams and choices are judged, or even that person who never raises their voice, but whose presence somehow leaves you exhausted, as if something invisible were being drained from you. If you like this content, don't keep this wisdom to yourself. Hit that subscribe button right now and share in the comments your personal protection mantra. I recognize the shadows in others without becoming their mirror. Join our community of conscious minds and let's navigate these psychological waters together. Because understanding these dangerous archetypes isn't just knowledge, it's emotional survival. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest psychiatrists in history, spent his life studying the human psyche and reached a frightening conclusion. Most of what governs us lies in the unconscious. Not just our own unconscious, but that of the people around us. And when someone doesn't recognize their own shadows, their traumas, their repressed desires, that psychic load needs to go somewhere. And that place, often, is you. It's like an invisible dance where we carry what the other refuses to carry, where we serve as a mirror for what the other doesn't want to see in themselves. And in this dance, we lose energy, clarity, and often, the very notion of who we are. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and Stoic philosopher, had also intuited this centuries earlier. In his Meditations, he writes, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." In other words, if you don't protect your mind, it will be colored or contaminated by the psychic patterns of others. This isn't poetry, it's survival. Therefore, understanding who these dangerous figures are, identifying their patterns and protecting your psychic space isn't selfishness. It's an act of self-love and integrity. It's understanding that the quality of your life is directly linked to the quality of the energies you allow around you. Today we're going to delve into the 6 types of people that Carl Jung would say you need to avoid, or at the very least maintain a healthy psychic distance from. And with the help of Marcus Aurelius, we'll understand how Stoic philosophy can help maintain your peace even when chaos disguises itself as affection. Prepare yourself to recognize patterns that perhaps you've never named, but have certainly felt. And prepare yourself also to perhaps recognize some of these patterns in yourself, because the first step towards liberation is always awareness. Type 1. The Unconscious Manipulator. We begin with the first type, the Unconscious Manipulator. This is perhaps the most difficult to identify, precisely because it operates outside the radar of consciousness, both theirs and yours. They don't raise their voice. They don't demand anything directly. They present themselves as fragile, sensitive, wounded. They use phrases like, "You do whatever you want, don't worry about me," or "I understand that you have other priorities," always with a tone that communicates exactly the opposite. They are the master of passive-aggressive communication, one that says yes with the mouth and no with everything else. But gradually, you begin to feel responsible for everything this person feels. If they're sad, it's because you disappointed them. If they're angry, it's because you were insensitive. If they're distant, it's because you didn't show enough interest. You notice that all conversations, somehow, revolve around their needs. All plans are adjusted for their comfort. All decisions seem, mysteriously, to prioritize what they want, even when it's apparently you who is choosing. Gradually, you begin to question yourself. Was I too harsh? Did I say something wrong? Am I being selfish? And without realizing it, you're already trapped. Jung calls this projection, a mechanism by which everything the other doesn't want to recognize in themselves is thrown onto you. The person can't deal with their own emotional emptiness, so they project onto you the responsibility to fill it. They can't process their own insecurities, so they make you feel guilty for what they feel. They don't recognize their own fears of abandonment, so they keep you prisoner of an emotional commitment where there's only one clear rule: you can never leave. The phrase from Jung that summarizes this is brutal. Whatever we don't confront in ourselves, we find as fate. But this fate often has a name, a face, and shares the bed, the house, or the workplace with you. Marcus Aurelius would compliment: you have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In other words, the way out isn't in changing the other. It's in seeing that this psychic game is happening and not embarking on it, not being code for someone else's chaos. It's establishing clear boundaries. It's returning to the other the responsibility for their own emotions. It's saying, I understand that you're feeling this way, but that doesn't mean I've done something wrong. The unconscious manipulator lives in a psychic reality where they are always the victim and you are always the executioner or the savior. Recognizing this pattern is the first step to getting out of this toxic dance and returning to the other what is rightfully theirs: the responsibility for their own emotions, choices, and paths. Type 2. The persona bearer. The second type is the persona bearer. This person seems perfect, polite, kind, successful, controlled. They always say what is expected, behave as the script demands. Their LinkedIn is impeccable, their Instagram a showcase of happy moments and enviable achievements. Their life seems to come from a catalogue where everything is in the right place, at the right time, with the right people, but you feel that something is wrong. There's no truth in the expressions, in the emotions, in the conversations. Everything seems scripted, as if you were in front of an actor who never breaks character. There's an artificiality in the air, a feeling that you're not in front of a person, but a carefully elaborated construction. According to Jung, the persona is the social mask we use to play our roles. It's necessary. After all, we can't be completely wild or authentic in all social situations. The persona helps us navigate the world, to adapt to different contexts. It's like an interface between your real self and the external world. The problem begins when the person identifies so much with their persona that they completely lose touch with their authentic self. They're no longer wearing a mask. They've become the mask. And when that happens, life transforms into a grand theatrical piece. The danger of living with the persona bearer lies precisely in this implicit demand. To be part of their world, you also need to enter the theatre. You need to perform. You need to follow the invisible script that dictates what is acceptable to feel, say, express. Living with the persona bearer is being suffocated by expectations. It's being watched in every gesture. It's hiding your spontaneous parts in order not to displease. Gradually, you also become a mask. You lose touch with your real self, your real desires, your genuine emotions. Imagine a dinner with friends where nobody can talk about failures, pains, fears, where the word depression is received with uncomfortable glances, where your recent separation is treated as a forbidden subject because it brings bad energy to the table. This is the reality of those who live with the persona bearer, a world where only the pleasant, the beautiful, and the socially acceptable can exist. Marcus Aurelius would say, think of yourself as dead. Now enjoy the rest of your life and live it as you have always wanted to live it. In other words, abandon the theatre. Real life is outside the script. What the Stoic philosopher teaches us is that life is too brief to be lived seeking approval, following external expectations, or performing a role that is not truly ours. Recognizing the persona bearer and how much you yourself may have already become one is fundamental to recover your authenticity. It's allowing yourself to feel what you really feel, say what you really think, be who you really are, even if that means disturbing the perfectly calm surface of the social theatre. Type 3. The shadow repressor. The third type is the shadow repressor. This type is the most polished, the most controlled, the most balanced. On the outside, they're that person who never loses their composure, who never has an inappropriate thought, who seems to live in an enviable state of moral and emotional purity. But inside, there's a cauldron of denied emotions. Everything this person considers ugly, weak, or wrong is repressed. Anger, denied. Envy, unthinkable. Desire, controlled. Imperfection, unacceptable. It's as if they had built an internal prison for all the emotions and impulses that don't fit into their idealized self-image. Jung called this repressed part shadow, everything that exists in us, but that we don't recognize as part of who we are. And as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, the repressed shadow doesn't disappear, it ferments, and sooner or later it explodes. This happens in various ways. Sometimes it's disproportionate outbursts of anger for trivial reasons, like fighting with a waiter because the food took a few minutes longer. Other times, it's the relentless judgment of others, harshly criticizing in others precisely what they deny in themselves, or even out-of-character behaviors that suddenly emerge, like inexplicable infidelities in people who claim to be above any instinct. These are people who always seem correct, but are unbearably moralistic, intolerant of mistakes, reactive in the face of spontaneity. They live trying to repress their own shadow, and, in doing so, become emotional time bombs. The danger here is twofold. First, the explosion, because living with someone who represses their shadow so much is like living next to a dormant volcano. You never know when or why it will erupt, but you know it will be devastating when it happens. Second, the contamination. Living alongside someone like this makes you also begin to repress your imperfections, to deny your moments of fragility, to hide your inappropriate emotions. It's as if their pattern became your own internal executioner. Imagine a partner who can never see you vulnerable because weakness is unacceptable, a father who can never see you err because in our family we are winners, a boss who never admits failures because that would tarnish our reputation. All of them are shadow repressors, and all of them create environments where there's no space for full humanity, neither theirs nor yours. Marcus Aurelius offers us a stoic but profoundly realistic counterpoint. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together. This stoic acceptance isn't resignation. It's recognition of life as it is, with its lights and shadows. It's understanding that being human is being imperfect, having moments of strength and moments of weakness, feeling elevated emotions and primitive emotions. The way out: create enough emotional distance to not be consumed by the other's repression, and more importantly, create space in your life for your own emotions, your own imperfections, your own complete humanity. Because, as Jung discovered, only by integrating our shadow, and not by repressing it, do we become whole beings. Type 4, the moral controller. The fourth type is the moral controller. They're not interested in growth. They want to control. They present themselves as a guardian of truth, morality, conduct. They talk about principles, values, traditions, not as guides for personal evolution, but as weapons to subdue others. The moral controller knows exactly how you should live, what you should think, what you should believe. They have answers for everything, unshakable certainties, and an almost obsessive need to convert everyone to their worldview. It could be a religious leader who uses fear and guilt as tools of control. It could be a parent who suffocates their children with rigid expectations about career, relationships, or lifestyle. It could be a partner who monitors your clothes, your friendships, your opinions. As Jung said, the greater the need to appear good, the greater the hidden shadow. The moral controller lives pointing the finger at others, but never looks in the mirror. And worse, they believe they're doing good. That's why it's so dangerous. Because their criticisms come disguised as care, their demands come dressed as truth, their judgments are presented as genuine concern for your well-being. "I'm telling you this because I love you," is the moral controller's favorite phrase, usually before a devastating criticism. "I just want the best for you," is the prelude to imposing their vision of what's best. "God wouldn't approve of this," or "what will people think?" are ways of transferring the responsibility of control to external entities. Gradually, you feel guilty just for being who you are, and you start to trim yourself, to adapt, to diminish. The morals of the other become your prison. Your authentic desires are repressed. Your choices are determined more by the fear of disapproval than by the pursuit of fulfillment. Imagine living trying to please someone who is never satisfied, who always finds a new flaw, a new area to improve, a new sin to confess. This is the experience of living with a moral controller. A roller coaster of attempts at approval, always followed by new demands. Marcus Aurelius, in his Stoic wisdom, reminds us, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. It's an invitation to authentic action instead of empty moral theorizing. It's recognizing that true ethics isn't about controlling others, but about living according to your own highest values. Don't submit to the control of those who only talk about virtue, but don't practice it. Recognize that behind each exaggerated moral judgment, there is, frequently, an unintegrated shadow. And understand that living trying to please a moral controller is like running on a treadmill. A lot of effort, a lot of exhaustion, but you never really advance. Type 5, the emotional complex. The fifth type is the emotional complex. Unlike the moralist who represses and projects, the complexed is someone dominated by undigested traumas. For Jung, complexes are like small personalities within our psyche, nuclei of memory and emotion that take over consciousness and act as if they were the self itself. And that's why a simple phrase can become a mortal offense for this type of person. We all have complexes to some degree. After all, we all carry emotional wounds from childhood, rejections, failures, situations where we felt humiliated or powerless. The difference is that the emotional complex is completely governed by these wounds. They don't have complexes. The complexes have them. You say something neutral, and from the other side comes an emotional explosion. How could you say my work could improve? You're saying I'm incompetent. As my father always said, you give a compliment, and the person takes it as irony. You're only saying I look nice to make me leave the house. In truth, you think I'm fat, don't you? You express a desire, and are accused of selfishness. You want to travel alone, after all I've done for you? Is this how you thank me? Everything becomes personal. Everything is a trigger. The complexed reacts not to the present, but to the past. And the problem is that not even they know this. They genuinely believe they're responding to what you said or did, when in reality, they're being dominated by an old film that continues to run in their unconscious. Living together becomes unstable, sometimes affectionate, sometimes chaotic. You feel like you're walking in a minefield. You begin to measure words, to predict emotions, to try to avoid the next storm. And in this dance, you start fading away. Because the emotional complex is inconstant, unpredictable, and unconscious. There's no space for growth, only for emotional survival. Jung said, complexes are living units of the psyche that can possess a person. And when you live with someone like this, you run the risk of also being possessed by doubt, by guilt, by the fear of making mistakes, by the constant walking on eggshells that becomes your standard way of existing alongside this person. Marcus Aurelius offers us a potent reflection on this type of person. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this, you have the power to revoke at any moment. What the Stoic philosopher teaches us here isn't to ignore abusive or harmful behaviors. It's to understand the root of the other's behavior, to not let ourselves be contaminated by it. It's to see the complexed not as someone bad or cruel, but as someone trapped in their own unhealed wounds. It's to have compassion, yes, but a compassion with clear and firm boundaries, because you can't heal the other's complex. Only they can do this work, and only when they're ready for it. Your function isn't to be a therapist, nor a savior, nor a scapegoat. It's to protect your own emotional health and, if possible, establish boundaries that communicate, I understand your suffering, but I can't be the receptacle for your unprocessed pain. Type 6, the psychic vampire. And finally, the sixth type, the psychic vampire. This is the most silent, the most smiling, the most dangerous. Doesn't shout, doesn't blame. They merely demand, in a veiled, subtle, constant way. Demands your presence, your listening, your attention, your energy, always in crisis, always needing you, always depending on your emotional strength to function. In the beginning, it seems like you're helping. You feel useful, necessary, generous. There's something almost heroic in being the one who's always available, always listening, always rescuing. The psychic vampire makes you feel special, chosen, indispensable. Only you truly understand me, they say. I don't know what I would do without you in my life, but with time, You begin to realize that you're exhausted, empty, drained, as if your soul were being sucked out in daily doses. Because it is. Jung didn't use the term psychic vampire, but he perfectly described this dynamic in symbiotic relationships, bonds where two individuals don't recognize themselves as whole beings, and one feeds on the psychic energy of the other. The psychic vampire isn't necessarily a narcissist or a malicious person. Often, they're someone with such a deep inner emptiness that they constantly need the energy of others to function. Someone who never develops sufficient internal resources to process their own emotions, regulate their own mental states, find meaning in their own existence. Therefore, they depend on you for everything, to make decisions, to validate choices, to process emotions, to give meaning to the events of their life. You become the eyes through which they see the world, the heart through which they feel life. And therein lies the danger. Because no human being was designed to carry the psychic existence of another. No one has unlimited energy. And when you become the receptacle of the crises, fears, emptiness and needs of another person, you inevitably end up emptied. Marcus Aurelius warns us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and nothing disorganizes the soul more than being in a bond where your function is to keep the other emotionally alive. The psychic vampire doesn't want to grow. They want to be carried. And the more you carry, the more you lose of yourself. The more you move away from your own desires, cycles, limits, until you become a reflection of the other's need. And this is the deepest form of self-abandonment. The signs that you're in a relationship with a psychic vampire are clear. You feel exhausted after encounters. You notice that all conversations revolve around the problems of the other. You note that there is rarely emotional reciprocity. You have the sensation of walking in circles because the same problems are discussed repeatedly without any movement towards resolution. The way out: establish clear boundaries. Recognize your own signs of exhaustion and respect them. Understand that you're not responsible for the emotional evolution of the other. And, in some cases, distance yourself completely, because there are relationships that can only exist in the vampiric dynamic, and any attempt to change the pattern results in manipulation, guilt, or abandonment. Conclusion: the path to liberation. The 6 types described above present real dangers to your psychic health, your personal development, and your inner peace. But there is a way out. Jung said, becoming conscious of one's own unconscious processes is the true path to liberation. This applies to you and to others. When you recognize these patterns, when you name these games, you stop dancing to the music that the other plays. And more, you also begin to see which of these 6 types lives, or has lived, within you. Because we all have shadow. We have all unconsciously manipulated. We have all worn masks. We have all fed on the energy of others in moments of crisis. The danger isn't in having shadow. The danger is in denying that it exists. Marcus Aurelius, at the end of his days, wrote something that could be the antidote against all these dangers. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, and I would say, on the quality of your relationships as well. Because nobody grows inside an emotional prison. Nobody fulfills themselves surrounded by bonds that drain, manipulate, or project. The path to liberation passes through deep self-knowledge, through understanding your own patterns, your own triggers, your own blind spots. It passes through integrating your own shadow, so that it isn't projected onto others. It passes through taking responsibility for your emotions, so that you don't become an unconscious manipulator or a psychic vampire. And it also passes through conscious choices, through having the courage to establish boundaries, even when that means displeasing people you love, through recognizing when a relationship is destroying you, even if slowly, through valuing bonds that make you grow and not those that keep you small. You deserve to live with those who know how to look at themselves, with those who don't make you a deposit for traumas, with those who don't demand that you nullify yourself to keep the peace. And this choice begins when you decide to see, and then to act, with firmness, with consciousness, and with love for yourself. Because in the end, as Jung would say, know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. And this is only possible when you recognize both your humanity and that of the other, with all the lights and shadows that this implies. If this content touched something deep within you, reflect. Which of these profiles have you faced, and which do you recognize in yourself? This is the beginning of healing, because the more light we shed on the unconscious, the less it controls us.